Hey, Dad.
Hey.
You're a lawyer.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So there's this kid at school whose parents died, and they had to move away.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys died, would me and Lucas have to move?
Well, if your mom and I died, Sam, it would be a disaster. I can't promise it would be easy, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But it is possible you would have to move because you are still too young to live by yourself, or it's possible someone might have to move in with you.
Well, who gets to decide where I live?
Well, at some point, if your mom and I died, you would be in front of a judge, and a judge would decide who gets to be your guardian, and that person would then decide where you live and if you have to move or not.
Wait. What's a guardian?
A guardian is a person that's appointed by the court that sort of steps into the role of a parent. Not exactly, but kind of. So just like a parent, your mom and I might make medical decisions for you or decide where you go to school or where you live, a guardian would be vested with all those same rights. A court would appoint a guardian, and the guardian would be able to make all those same decisions for you until you're an adult.
Do I get a say in who gets to be in charge of me?
Well, since you're old enough to talk and participate and provide information that's helpful to a judge, yes, you would be a very valid and very valuable asset to help determine what your best interest is. So yes, a judge would want to hear what you have to say. But even if a child is not of an age where they can participate, every child in North Carolina is given a legal advocate called a guardian ad litem. That's usually an attorney or a volunteer that's represented by an attorney. But in any case, it's a person that's appointed by the court that's trusted, and they're a professional, and they look out for your best interest whether or not you can meaningfully participate. So you'll be protected in either case.
How does the court figure out who should be my guardian?
Well, they consider a lot of different things, but they're looking out for your best interest. They're also required to give great weight to the nominations that your mom and dad would make. So if your mom and dad have something that they want to tell the court about their preferences, the court is required to give great weight to their recommendations. So what your mom and I have to say about it is a very, very important factor.
How do parents tell the judge what they want if they're dead?
Well, they do it ahead of time. They write it down ahead of time and express what their wishes are, and then that way it's there for the judge should they die. And the way that you do that legally is you do it in a last will and testament. Have you heard of a last will and testament? Well, most people that think about a last will and testament think of it as a document that directs who gets property after you die. So you can say, I leave my house to my cousin Susie, or whatever you want to do in a document like that, and when you die, the property goes to those people. But in this case, a will is very, very important because not only does it do that, but it also nominates those people who would take over making decisions about you if your mom and I died. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, why don't the parents get to decide who's guardian? Why is it up to the judge?
Well, if you think about it, I might make a will nominating somebody to be your guardian, and then that person might have a complete change of character. They might go through some very difficult times that changes who they are, and they might not no longer be suitable. But for me, I might not update my will. I might not get a chance to. I might not have the capacity to. And if the situation like that comes up, a judge is going to be able to say, well, wait a minute, the situation has changed, and so we're going to do something different than what the parents would want.
How long does it take to get a guardian, though?
Well, there's a few different ways you can be appointed a guardian in our court system, but it can take anywhere from a couple of months to a year or more.
That's a long time.
It is.
Well, who makes decisions for me while I'm waiting for a guardian?
Well, a judge is going to either appoint someone to be responsible for you, or they're going to place you in the care of somebody that they approve of, and then that care is going to be monitored by social workers or other professionals. So they'll place you in someone's care, or they'll appoint you someone that's going to be responsible that you already know and have a relationship with.
Will I have to live in an orphanage or foster care?
Well, foster care is there if there is no one available to serve, but foster care is a last resort. So they're not eager to put kids in foster care because they don't have enough foster parents that are willing to serve as people to take in other children. And so because of that, they want to save the foster parents for the absolutely most desperate cases. So if there's any alternative to foster care, they'll exhaust that first, and they'll look to the list that we've prepared first for someone as an alternative to foster care. Now, orphanages are not like you see on TV. Most kids end up with another family, like as a result of the death of a parent, are going to have no more than 5 kids in the home.
Did you make a will to make sure I go to the right people?
Your mom and I both made separate wills, and yes, in those wills we've given an exhaustive list of every person that we could think of that would be responsible enough to provide care for you before the court has to rely on their own expertise to make a decision.
Does the guardian have to pay for my food and clothes?
Well, your mom and I have done separate planning to deal with that part. If we were to die, then all the things that we own would go into a special kind of entity called a trust. And people that we trust, we are put in charge of it. And until you're old enough, well into adulthood, to use that money responsibly, the other people that we've named to be in charge of it are going to use that money for your support, health, education, and maintenance. So you're going to have your tuition paid for, you're going to have your food paid for, you're going to have your shelter provided for. You're not going to want for anything. And there's always going to be a pot of resources where all of our property goes that makes sure that your needs are met until you're an adult.
Well, if you die when I'm still a child, why won't I get my inheritance when I'm 18?
You mean instead of well into adulthood?
Yeah.
Well, the reason for that is because when you're 18, you might still be dealing with all kinds of problems as a result of losing your parents. I mean, it's not going to be an easy thing for you to grow up without your mom and dad around if that ends up being what happens. And so when you turn 18, if you get all this property, which, is what would happen if we didn't plan, and some people prefer their children to get property at 18, and that's fine. But if you get all this property at 18 and you're still dealing with the loss of your mom and dad, you might be hanging around with bad people, you might be doing unhealthy things, you might be doing dangerous things, and I think I would prefer to wait a little longer to make sure that you are reaching a level of adulthood where you can manage this money responsibly. And I think that might be an older age if you have 2 dead parents. So in the meantime, we will have somebody that's in charge that manages that money for you, and then when you reach an age where I feel like it's appropriate, then you're going to have full access to whatever's left, but it's going to be used for you regardless.
If someone wants to do that planning, what does that involve exactly?
Well, someone can get in touch with me through our website, through email, or by phone, and what we would do is set up an appointment with that person to gather some information, get questions answered, and gather some insights so that we can kind of get people on the right path and push them towards the final product that they're looking for. Once they have that information, once we get that information from them that we need to prepare their documents, it usually takes about 2 weeks to put together a draft, and then we let them review that draft. And once they review that draft, how long it takes to go through that editing process is really up to them. But then at some point we'll have a final version of those documents available, and then they'll sign it in front of witnesses and a notary. And then they'll have a final document that will be adequate and legally sufficient to inform the judge of what their wishes are if they pass away and they have children that are still too young to manage their own care.
So how do I make sure I don't get scammed or end up somewhere unsafe?
Well, there are going to be a lot of safeguards in the court system and as part of the planning that make sure that doesn't happen. But if you ever have a problem, you just call the office, you tell them who you are, you tell them what's going on, and then we have a whole team of professionals here that can talk to you about what's going on and can step in on your behalf if needed. Pretty cool, right? So even if you were not the boss's daughter, but you were the daughter of a deceased client, you would be treated the exact same way.
Does it cost a lot to plan and name a guardian ahead of time?
Well, naming a guardian is a very small piece of a much larger plan. But no, it doesn't cost a lot, especially when you consider what you're accomplishing by getting this done. So, Samantha, the key takeaways from this conversation are: first, if something happens to me and your mom and you need somebody to take over, there will be someone to take over to make decisions for you. Second, I made a will and it nominates a guardian, but ultimately it's up to a judge to decide who's going to be your guardian. However, a judge is both required by law and very interested in knowing what your mom and I have to say about it. The process of naming a guardian can take a while, but you will be safe. And it is unlikely that you will have to go into a foster home. Anytime you need help, if you're confused about what's happening or you have questions that you're not getting satisfactory answers to, you can call the office for help anytime. And finally, there's a plan in place to make sure you can eat and go to college if your mom and I die. But there will be someone else in charge of making sure all that happens until you're old enough and mature enough to take over the management of your own assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Radical.